Welcome to the Bread of Life channel. I'm here with Dr. Change Tan. She's a biochemist. She was born in China, and she's going to be telling us about her journey of faith and how she came to know the Lord. Welcome, Dr. Tan. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's an honor to have you. So, can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing in China? What were your beliefs at that time, and what was your life like?
Well, I was born very weak, and my mom was afraid that she would lose me at any moment. That's why my name is Change, which in my own village language is Chang'e, is a surviving goose.
Mm.
Um, my mom, my mom used to, take me to various places around my village to worship different gods. But when I went to school, I was told that there was no God and no savior. We are the master of our own. So I was an atheist for most of my life. I came to United States in 1994 to pursue my PhD education in biochemistry. And I was told, well, I mean, somebody introduced me about Jesus. I said, no, no God, no God. There's no God. You believe in Jesus. That's because you're stupid. um, so, by God's grace, one night I was made aware that I had a double standard. So I decided to use the same standard to my science and Jesus. So with the science, I used to be always open, always accepting whatever I was told, whether I understood it or not, I accepted it. But when I was told about Jesus, I, rejected it immediately without thinking. So after I was made aware of my double standard, I decided to use the same standard, and I decided to investigate
Oh,
what
wow.
this so-called Jesus is. So I went back, started reading the Bible from the beginning, and Genesis, right, from the beginning. But when I reached to Abraham, I was shocked that Abraham lied, not only once, but twice. I said, wow, this is the so-called the father of faith. But he did not kill me. So I kept on reading until I reached David. David killed me. He did not only kill the giant, but also me, because he was called a person after God's own heart, but he committed adultery and killing. So like
Murder? Hmm.
murder, yeah. So murdered um, by some using somebody else, right? I decided, well, if the God I was told is really as what the Bible described, I do not want to have any relationship with him. Only later on, like 8 years later, 8 years later, by God's grace, he showed me he was living and real. So I accepted Jesus as my savior.
Wow. Now, did you finish reading the Bible? Because you got to David. Did you stop there?
I stopped there.
Okay. So, how did you get to this point where you accepted Jesus?
I think maybe 1 or 2 years before then, my mom became a Christian. And she came to United States at the beginning of 2004. She wanted me to be a Christian so badly. So I don't know what she's doing, maybe praying for me every day. And two miracles, actually, two miraculous healings occurred just in my home. One was a miraculous healing of my mom's headache. Another was a miraculous healing of my younger daughter. However, even though even though I experienced those healings right by me, right beside me, I was like, well, whatever. Yeah, I knew I was happy. My mom was healed and my daughter was healed, but still,
You
So
still
my
didn't
mom
believe at
wanted
that
me
point.
to be a Christian so badly, and as a good dog, a good daughter, I regarded myself as an obedient daughter. So I one day I decided to be baptized for my mom's sake. Even though I did not believe Jesus, but I decided to be baptized for my mom's sake. So I was scheduled to be baptized on one Sunday. And I went through all the lectures about the meaning of being baptized. But the Friday, my husband, who was in Philadelphia, called me. He wanted me to go back to Philadelphia immediately for fingerprints taken because we were applying for a green card, and I had to have my fingerprints taken. So time when I decided to be baptized for my mom's sake, I was interviewed. So since for me, God wanted to have a personal relationship with us, not because my mom believes in Jesus or because my daughter, or whatever. So God, it's amazing. God, the creator of the universe, he wants to have a personal relationship with a nobody like me. As I mentioned earlier, that I was introduced about Jesus, and 8 years previous, I was made aware that I had a double standard. That was in a conference talking about Jesus.
Mhm.
God is the whole meeting was, God was love. And the night I was made aware about my double standard was a professor actually was presenting. So he was talking about the sun, the moon, and the stars. And that was during his presentation, suddenly I was made aware that I had a double standard. So I knew Jesus, right? I heard about Jesus, but I did not believe him. Where a crisis occurred in my life, I just could not deal with it. There's too much. So I decided to fast. Even though I did not believe in Jesus, I decided to fast. Well, that was a very big decision because I was born in a very remote countryside of China in Hunan. In my hometown, and all my life, I need rice, dry rice, 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If I had have anything else like congee or bread, I would become hungry pretty soon. And when I was hungry, I would have a severe headache. So that day I decided to skip breakfast. I was prepared to be hungry and to have a severe headache. So I was a postdoc at Harvard Medical School at that time. I went to work in the morning without breakfast. I worked. And suddenly I saw that my watch, was pointing to 1 p.m. I was so surprised. Wow, that does not make sense, right? I should be hungry, but I'm not. I should be having a severe headache. I did not. So I was so surprised. The only explanation I had was God is real and he is living. Otherwise, I just should be hungry and I should have a severe headache. So as a scientist, facing the fact, I had no choice but to accept Jesus as my savior. That's at the end of 2004. So in 2005, I came to University of Missouri as an assistant professor.
Did your crisis get better after that? Because you were fasting because of a crisis.
I did not remember that specific crisis. What happened? Maybe it's just after I said, "Oh my God, God is actually God is real and is living." That's what counts, right? But actually, after I became a Christian, after I came to University of Missouri and become a professor, I had many more crises and much more severe than the one I had before. So my path actually had not become easier, but in the process, I also experienced um, God talking and walking with me. So it's
Wow.
every time, every time I went through difficulties, it's the same message um, bubbling up. God is real and God is living. Also, God is loving and He cares.
Wow. So, can you tell us some of your experiences with God that made him real and living?
Maybe two examples. One is I'm not a good driver, so I was very afraid of driving long distance. So one day I was scheduled to give a seminar at University of Kansas, which at Lawrence, which is like a 4 hours drive for me. Since I was a bad driver and I was, I had never driven a long distance. So I decided that I was going to have one of my students driving me there. But my husband told me that he was coming home. So, well, I said, okay, then you can drive me there, right? But at the last minute, he canceled his plan. So I had to drive myself. I was so nervous. So I could not sleep Saturday night. My seminar was Monday. So I decided to drive there on Sunday, but I was so nervous, so I could not sleep Saturday. Sunday morning, I went to church and had lunch at church, practiced choir. So I started driving maybe 2 p.m. or something. But I was so tired. I just could not, I could not stay awake no matter what I did. So I decided to drive onto into a resting place to rest, to have a sleep. And I was, I pull off my car and I started to pray. So, amazingly, God, energized me like instantly. And I was wide awake, so I could drive to Lawrence, Kansas by myself without missing any access and no accidents at all. So I was so amazed, because God was there with me, by me at the moment, even if I had a good friend to call and she came to my rescue immediately, that would be 2 hours after, because I was 1 hour driving there. So, but God was there by me, and he listened to my prayer and gave me strength immediately. So that was a one experience.
Well, when I was reading your testimony, you told about one miracle about your teeth. And I
Oh,
thought
my
that was
teeth.
really amazing.
Okay.
Actually, yeah, you have a lot of great stories, but do you want to tell the story about your teeth?
Okay, so my two front teeth, I cannot point them again because it's the size is changed. So one day we had frozen rain in Columbia, Missouri, and everything was so slippery. So but I got home regardless. The next morning, my best friend who was visiting me, she wanted to to go to see Amish people. I was hesitated because the weather, right? So she told me, well, all the ice, all the frozen rain was melted. So she took me outside, to show me that no more slippery road. We went out to the road, walking, not driving, walking outside. I have a very steep driveway. So we walked out safely, and then we turned around, ready to go home, and she fell. I wanted to pull her up, and I fell by her. So she had a bruised eye, and I had a mouth filled with blood. A few days later, a friend of mine told me, "Oh wow, why your two teeth look so strange?" And I looked at the mirror. The two front teeth was brown. So I went to see my dentist. My dentist had some tests. He found that both my teeth were fractured, and they had lost sensation. So I could not feel any coldness no matter what he did. So he scheduled a root canal
Root canal.
for me. And a few days after, I noticed that, my tooth color actually is lightening. So I canceled the appointment, even though my dentist told me that um, my teeth will become darker and darker, right? The dead nerves would not come back. But I noticed that my teeth color was recovering, so I canceled the appointment. And later on, actually, my teeth totally recovered, not only in coloration, but also in sensation. So now I can feel the coldness. So
Wow.
so that's my favorite thing to do in the cold winter now, because when I do that, I can feel the coldness with my teeth, which I did not know. Actually, my teeth could do that, all right? Because I did not know any. I mean, not. My knowledge of biology was very, very limited. So it's amazing how God, you know, teaching me biology in this way. So I learned that, wow, the color of teeth actually needs to be actively maintained
Mm.
by our nerves and blood vessels, right? And also, actually, my feeling of coldness, was through the teeth, which I had no idea. Now I could never forget, what it is a tooth can do. So it's amazing.
And that's really miraculous, right? Because once
It
your
is
teeth
a miracle.
die like that, they don't normally just spring back to life. That's
Right.
why they have to take out the root and the nerve because yeah. And I mean, my oldest son had a tooth like that. His
Hmm.
front tooth got knocked and it turned brown. It didn't recover. They had to do a root canal and it
Hmm.
stayed brown until it fell out.
Hmm.
So, yeah. But that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank God for what
Yeah.
He did on me and in me, really in me.
Now, this is only really the beginning of your journey that we've talked about so far because you've had a long journey, and part of it had to do with science and what happened with uh, once you became a Christian, what happened. How did you start questioning some of your previous beliefs regarding science?
Well, I was an atheist and an evolutionist, right? I became a Christian at the end of 2004, but I was still an evolutionist. So basically, my science and God was opposing initially before I became a Christian. And then after I became a Christian, God and my science were in different corners of my life. I was still an evolutionist. But in 2006, George Smith, so that's the professor who received a Nobel Prize in my department. In 2006, he came to me, asked me to teach molecular biology, a course that I had never taken myself. But I agreed that I would do it. So that request forever changed my life without his knowing or my knowing. That's because when I was preparing my lectures, I noticed that the genes involved in bacterial and eukaryote DNA replication, transcription, and translation are mostly unrelated. That was very shocking to me because all I had heard about or know of was life came from no life, and eukaryotes evolved from prokaryotes. So, with most of the gene involved in such a vital process, even though I was, as I said, I was trained as a chemist, so my knowledge in biology was very limited, but I knew that the DNA replication, transcription, and translation are essential for life, for each of the life forms we have known of. So if eukaryotes had evolved from prokaryotes, then those vital processes should be similar, should be, easily interchangeable. But with the genes involved, bacteria use their own gene. Those genes you cannot find homologs in eukaryote and vice versa. So that really made me think maybe eukaryote could not have evolved from prokaryotes. Well, I saw that was a great discovery. So how come nobody has discovered that, right? So I thought, wow, that was a great discovery. But soon, soon I started to doubt myself because I was trained as a chemist again. So I thought, well, must be me was on the wrong. It's because of my ignorance about biology, about evolution, right? So maybe people have figured it out how eukaryote could have evolved from prokaryotes. So I started to read, evolutionary literature. And also, meanwhile, I teach molecular biology year after year. And each time I taught molecular biology, I need to face the same thing, right? Looking at the genes involved in bacterial and eukaryote DNA, replication, transcription, and translation. Later on, I also look at the genes for archaea, gene replication, transcription, and translation. Seems that each domain of life has its own way of doing those things, even though, from the perspective of DNA replication, transcription, the translation, archaea is more closely related to eukaryotes. But if you compare other genes, then you see that archaea are more closely related to bacteria. And if you compare other genes, right, a different gene set, depending on what gene you compare, sometimes we find bacteria are more closely related to eukaryote, sometimes archaea more closely related to eukaryote, sometimes the bacteria and the archaea stay together, but most of the time they were just separate. So that really made me question about the idea of how all organisms are interconnected while one big evolutionary tree of life, right? So I see more that instead of one tree seems is a forest of life. Well, many people have noticed that one tree does not work. So many people have been promoting the idea of a web of life. But I think a web of life can be the consequence, is an artifact of our forcing a forest of a tree into one big evolutionary tree of life. So unfortunately, my conclusion based on genes, especially genes involved in DNA replication, transcription, and translation, as well as other essential genes, about the relationship of different organisms on Earth. The conclusion does not agree with the popular belief, and that was what caused me a lot of pain and a lot of trouble, and eventually leads to my being fired by my university.
Wow. So what happened when you came to that conclusion? Who did you talk about that with?
I started to write articles. So my first draft ever, my first draft ever on the topic of problems of evolutionary biology was titled Were Darwin Alive?" So if Darwin were alive today, knowing what we know about the genes, especially those I saw as essential genes, right, genes that are necessary for survival and propagation of organisms, especially those genes involved in DNA replication, transcription, and translation. That is the basic things about molecular biology. If he had known all of this and he was alive, right, what would he think? What would he do with his book, his Origin of Species book, right? So I wrote an article and I sent to, I asked for feedback from 4 friends. One friend never got back to me, and he was a friend that had helped me a lot, edited almost all of my articles before then, right? He never got back to me.
And these were 4 scientists.
Those are
What were
4
their fields?
scientists,
Yeah. What were their
for
fields? Mhm.
4 biologists.
Okay.
Um, One friend told me, he said, I have read your articles on manuscript 2 times. Excuse me. I have read your article 2 times, but I did not make any single edit because nobody would publish that article. Another friend called me to his office. He said, I read halfway. I went through your manuscript halfway. He told me, do not abuse your position. The fourth friend gave me a lot of feedback, but also told me, do not put my name in your acknowledgement because I do not want to be connected. I don't want to have my name be connected with such article. So that was a very surprising experience for myself. Maybe I should tell you another story happened. I think a couple of years before then. So I told my department chair about my conclusion about the origin of eukaryotes. So basically, I told him that I thought prokaryotes and the eukaryotes could not have shared a common ancestor. And I asked him whether I could change my research direction from the study of oogenesis, so formation of eggs using Drosophila as a model organism. I asked him whether I can change my research direction. He told me it is the freedom of academia. And I told him that I wanted to write a book about what is life molecularly. So talking about the differences of prokaryotes and eukaryote DNA replication, transcription, and translation. It's always about that, right? So he asked me to give a talk in a faculty to faculty seminar. So I did. And that seminar room, fortunately, there was no stone in that room. If there was any stone there, I would be dead.
So why do you think there was such a resistance to these ideas that you were presenting?
Well, it was very surprising for me because I was very naive. I thought, science was all about evidence and logical reasoning. So, and I thought that, all my conclusion was based on evidence and sound logical reasoning. And that actually my department chair later on during my hearing section when my school wanted to fire me during that time, he agreed with me that my evidence was good and my logical reasoning was sound, but he did not agree with my conclusion. And I understand, of course, with a lot of pain, I learned that because the the view of how life came to be and how different organisms are connected. That is, life came from no life, and complicated life evolved from simpler life. That view, that evolutionary biological view, it touch our lives, touch our hearts, right? It really is connected with our basic view of life about life itself and our position in the universe. So many people have based on their whole life, their career on evolutionary biology, and I was the same as them before, right? It's by God's grace, I was asked to teach molecular biology, and he showed me the problems with evolutionary biology. So I changed them, from an evolutionist to a creationist. So I understand that it's difficult, it's difficult to be told you're wrong, and especially if you're told you're wrong by a nobody, and be told you're wrong in your basic foundation. Is like your foundation is not a foundation at all, right? You don't have a foundation at all. That is very difficult. I think I understand. So if I were in the same position, I would do the same thing. And since I was an atheist and I was an evolutionist, I really understand that. So I know if it were me, I would do the same thing as them.
Oh, wow, that's really gracious of you to say that and, to have mercy on them and forgive them.
It's from God, not from me.
You know, you you had something about your name. When do you want to talk about your name and what your name uh what it means to you now?
Now, did I tell you about the geocentric and the heliocentric story
Yes.
we mentioned about earlier?
We mentioned about it earlier. Yeah,
Okay.
but mhm.
So yeah, so by myself, the only thing I have is a chain and a self. So 己 in Chinese is self, right? It's kind of like a change. You can respell it as a CHAN, chain, and ji in Chinese is self. So by myself, the only thing I have, or all I have, is a chain that I used to chain myself. But by God's grace, I am still alive. And yeah, actually, I told many people that the tears I have shared in Columbia, Missouri, well, more than all the tears I shared in all other places put together. So I had a lot of difficulties in the past few years in Columbia, Missouri. So only by God's grace, I'm still alive, and I'm still laughing. And Jesus is my son, and he is my laugh. He is my joy. So each time, I experience a hardship, I also experience God's closeness to me. As I said, he talks with me, he walks with me. Most of the time, he would use Bible, Bible to encourage me. But occasionally, and actually, I would say many times, he traveled he traveled many, many extra miles, to encourage me via miracles and visions, even uh, audible voices a lot of times, most of the times in Mandarin. There was one time God talked with me in my village dialect, which is very striking. So that actually was also connected with my name, right? So Chang'e, I think you are getting familiar with the change is two words, right? Chang is one word, E is another word. So Chang'e, that's my name. But my mom calls me Shangze. So one day, one day, I was I went to my office to work, and on my way from my parking garage, university parking garage, to my office, and when I was walking, I started my prayer. So, oh God, that's how I started my prayer normally. Oh God. And God answered, "Hey, Shanze, nobody except my mom would, respond to me, right? Even my dad, would not call me that way. Only my mom does that. So only my mom, when I call her mom in my native language, she would reply, "Hey, Shanze." So A is like a yes, right? I'm here. Shanze is Shang is my first letter, so first word, Chang. That's in my village language is Shang, right? Zai is like a child. For 3 days, it's amazing. For 3 days, every time I prayed, I started my prayers. Oh God, before I said anything else, God would reply, "Hey, Shanzi." I was so shocked. Wow, a God, how could he be so close to me? I mean, in my village language, the language only spoken in my own village, nowhere else. Only my village speaks that language, and only my mom would call me or respond to me, "Hey, Shanzhe," right? So that is a God, a personal God. I mean, who am I? Who am I? I'm nobody. And but he cares. He cares me.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I know you've had a lot of trouble in the past few years, but you've also had some victories. Dr. Change Tan wrote The Stairway to Life, and it's an origin of life reality check. And this is a really, really good book that talks about the problems, because you've been talking about your discovery with the evolution of prokaryote to eukaryote. But later on, you went to research abiogenesis, and could this happen? Could non-life become life? And so, do you want to talk about that?
Um, Actually, it's amazing because as you mentioned, I started my journey questioning about evolutionary biology. It's the the differences between prokaryotes and eukaryotes, and that also made me think. How could the life start from the very beginning, right? Could it be possible, actually life could be generated naturally uh, by a biogenesis. So I studied the question that and I started to read articles. Scientists study orange of life, right? Many experiments have been done on that. So I started to read those articles about how to make the starting materials of life, like amino acids, nucleic bases, or the sugars. And also others study how you can make, short polymers using modified nucleotides. So yeah, in that regard, I am grateful that I was trained as a chemist, right? Because if I were trained as a biologist at the beginning, then reading those articles that are mostly chemistry, about reaction conditions or the reagents, temperature, pH, that would be difficult for a biologist. It's too much details for a biologist. But trained as a chemist, that's like, oh, that's easy. That's and the following about all the chemical reactions, this functional group and that functional group, how you activate a functional group or protect some functional groups, deactivate other functional groups. So you can only allow reaction, between the functional groups that you wanted to, right? So that was quite a journey. So it's amazing when I delve into the details on the literature of um, Orange of Life, abiogenesis, all right? It's amazing that actually both chemistry. So on one hand is chemistry, on the other hand is a biology, right? Um, Both the consideration from the chemical point of view and from the biological point of view. So one is top-down approach, one is a bottom-up approach. Regardless of where is your starting point, the conclusion is very clear. It is impossible for life had come from no life naturally. So that is the book about, about the orange of life.
Yes, and you can get this book on Amazon, and I put a link in the description. So please get this book if you are interested in this topic. It's a very good book. It basically goes through all the problems, like as if life was a staircase and you're trying to get to life. What are the obstacles that you would face in those chemical reactions? So that it's a very excellent book.
And that is a free advertisement for me. Oh my gosh, you are doing an advertisement for me. Thank you so much. I did not intend to do that.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love the book, so it's very helpful. Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Tan, for being on and for sharing your story. And I hope this will bless many people. God bless you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
It's an honor for me too.
His own self for heavenly food.